There was a huge explosion, and the sound was terrifying. My windows were pulled out of the frames and thrown into the middle of the room. The glass was shattered and was everywhere. I hit the wall, and I remember lots of black smoke around. So the explosion was not even very close. It was around, like, I think 500 or 600 meters away from me. But the blast was so strong that it created destruction all over the place.
Well, Kira, thank you so much for joining us on Times Radio again. First of all, I wonder if you can just take me back to the 2nd of January and talk me through what happened on that day and how it affected you personally.
Hello, James. Thank you so much for having me. So on January 2nd, I woke up around 7 a.m. Because of the air raid siren. It was not unusual because over the last couple of weeks in Kiev, this is how we usually wake up because Russia usually attacks at night or in the early morning. We take the air raid sirens seriously because we have experience from the last year that the attacks were vicious and it was basically a barrage missile attack. I was on the way to the under the stairs where I usually hide during the attacks. But because it happened so quickly, I was late. I was on my way when there was a huge explosion, and the sound was terrifying. My windows were pulled out of the frames and thrown into the middle of the room. The glass was shattered and was everywhere. I hit the wall, and I remember lots of black smoke around. So the explosion was not even very close. It was around, like, I think 500 or 600 meters away from me. But the blast was so strong that it created destruction all over the place. I was running out to check if my neighbors are okay. And the worst thing about it was that the attack did not stop at the moment. And you can imagine the darkness, black smoke, some fires that started because of the smoke, and still explosions in the sky. So it was absolutely terrifying. And we were trying to help each other with the neighbors. I was looking for my cat because I didn't know like what was happening with her. And generally it felt like Armageddon. And it was indeed like one of the most terrifying experiences. After the first shock, I checked that I was pretty much okay, and I was really, really lucky because I had only minor injuries. But not all my neighbors were so lucky, and so we were waiting for the ambulances to come, and we're just trying to support each other and stay strong. During that attack on Kiev, 5 people were killed and more than 100 were injured. And I'm sure that the numbers are even bigger because I know that there are many people who did not report what happened. So one of the terrifying experiences is to see your home that you worked for and loved for and built being torn apart, and knowing that you as a human being can do absolutely nothing to stop against the missile that is coming from the air. It's just a huge pile of metal that you absolutely cannot do anything to stop. And it's a feeling of helplessness and terror and just not knowing like how can you protect yourself, because that time I was lucky, but what about all the next times? And these attacks continue, and every single morning we are waking up to more information of the victims, and we are waking up for the air raid sirens as well. So this terror continues.
Well, thank goodness you are okay, Kira, and we really appreciate you joining us today on Times Radio. But I know it was an incredibly traumatic experience for you and for your neighbours in your building. And I suppose it reminds us that there is still a huge bombardment of Kiev and other Ukrainian cities and towns by the Russians. And there's a huge rebuilding job that will be required whenever this war ends in Ukraine. I know that figure has been estimated at least $400 billion. And I know you're calling for more effective sanctions on Russia, not least to help pay for some of that rebuilding project.
Well, first of all, when somebody is asking regarding like how do we know that Putin does not want peace, now I have a proof, and it is 7 bags of the shattered glass on my backyard that I took out of my home as a proof that Putin does not want peace. It's a terror that continues on our territory by Russia. Secondly, I put the plastic on my windows to cover for the midterm, and then I ordered the windows, and it was easier for me because I can afford that. But many of the people that were targeted at that day cannot do it, and it's just terrifying when again like all of your belongings disappear and you have to start over with no finances. So this is one of the emotional pressures that I feel that we need to make sure that Russia pays not in 10 years, not in 20 years, but right now. And this is why we are working to confiscate Russian money, Russian assets that are being stored in the democratic countries. Right now, the estimate is that it is 500 billion of both Russian state assets and oligarch assets that are being frozen under the sanctions. And it is absolutely fair and logical to make sure that we take those money and cover for the damage that Russia does, but also help Ukraine to win the war. There is another angle of this, is that right now, 2 years into full-scale invasion, Russia is still able to produce missiles, drones, and to send them our way. When our military disassemble the missiles and drones, they see that there are many Western details there. So it means that it became more complicated for Russia to manufacture the weapons, but it did not become impossible. So this is why they can continue to pay a little bit more, but continue to manufacture those deadly weapons. And this is why we are calling for the sanctions to close the loopholes and for our allies to concentrate on making sure that Russia is unable to buy the particles that they need to create the weapons to send our way. I think it's again a very fair ask, because how can we work towards the victory if Russia is still able to ramp up their manufacturing capability in terms of the weapons? And it's also a very important challenge for the democracies, because Russia is trying to unite countries behind itself as well and get the weapons from there, creating another evil axis to terrorize the democratic world. And if you look at all the events that happened over the last year, you see that Russia's hand is at many hot places on our earth and in many terrorist attacks. So it makes all the senses to have it stopped and to decrease Russia's power.
Why do you think the issue of sanctions has dropped off the agenda a bit? I mean, at the start of the full-scale invasion, Western sanctions were a big talking point and what Western governments could do to punish those connected to the regime in Moscow. But you're right, since then, we've heard less about it, and maybe there are new sanctions that need to be imposed. Why do you think it's been overlooked?
James, we do not need new sanctions, honestly. Well, we do need, but we need to make sure that the first 12 packages or 11 packages that are already there actually work and do not have loopholes. Because at the very beginning, sanctions were mostly to punish Russian oligarchs and to establish this feeling that you shouldn't be trading with Russia, that you shouldn't do business with Russia, etc. But there were still many loopholes there, and everybody felt oh, we have so many packages and it probably should work. But if you're looking again at the way that Russia is trading through the third party countries, through Kazakhstan, through India, through China, you will see that the trade continues. So we right now need to, if we see that it is an issue, we need to go to the step one, evaluate which sanctions are not working, and make sure that actually from step by step, from package one till current package, they all are actually doing what they're supposed to do. Because it's very obvious for us, and again, we feel it in the most terrifying way, that they are not working as they were supposed to.
Just wanted to ask you, Kira, about the war more broadly and where we are at the moment. Obviously, in recent months, we've seen major developments in the Middle East. Only in recent weeks, there's the crisis in the Red Sea. Are you worried that because of the focus on the situation in the Middle East now, that Ukraine is dropping down the global agenda? Is that a concern for you?
It is a concern for me, James, because we have already been there. You know, in 2014, when Russia started its invasion and took over Crimea and Donetsk and Luhansk Republic territories, it was like really a big thing for the world for the last maybe 2 or 3 months, and then like it became business as usual and became a new normal. So this is what we are very much afraid of, that for the world, the war in Ukraine will become just a new normal, and that will call for decrease of the support and both military support and political support, and then we will be left alone. I do not believe that this time it would happen. I think anybody from the democratic countries understands what is happening and how important the fight that we are fighting is. However, we cannot sustain without the Western support, and we know that. Because from our side, we are doing everything possible and impossible. So Ukrainian people are fighting at the front, creating this shield over the Europe. But without their weapons and without the financial support, it will be very hard for us to last long. And of course, to have progress and to win the war.
And of course, we're still waiting to see if the current impasse in US Congress can be resolved, an extra military aid supplied to Ukraine. But of course, this week we've had Donald Trump winning the Iowa Republican caucus. It appears he is almost certain to be the Republican nominee for president. There's a lot of talk about what would happen were he to become president again, and whether he would provide Ukraine with the support it needs to fight Russia. How concerned are you about Donald Trump potentially being in the White House again?
We are concerned about the statements that he makes. I think it's a huge populist illusion to hope that you can solve complicated problems by simple decisions. And I think, again, it's illusion, and it's unfair to promise people that. It doesn't make us feel good, knowing that we may be pressured to some negotiations, because we understand for sure, and we understand by proofs of our lives, that you cannot make deals with Putin, because you cannot assure that he will keep his part of the deal. And this is why, of course, it is a concern on how US elections will influence the support from the United States. I'm also calling for our European allies to have a strategy and a plan of how the European security would look like in case there would be political changes in the United States. And I think right now is the right time to be discussing this and to make all the necessary preparation if that would be the case, because we also realize that any of those actions that are being discussed, that they will have an influence on European security. So all in all, we entered 2024 in a very tough spot where we have both support from both our strongest allies, US and European Union, being stalled due to some political reasons. So first is the Congress impasse, and second is the delay because of the Hungary veto right. So alongside the promises that to stay with us for as long as it takes, it seems that the bureaucracy and politics are taking over that, are taking over doing the right thing. And it is, of course, very disturbing. And I can tell you, when I'm going to the front and talking to our soldiers, it's incredibly hard, almost impossible to explain to them why there are delays with the support, and also why there are delays with the weapons delivery, because there are some political debates in those countries, and they are asking the fair question, like, don't people understand what the threat is, and that is happening every single day, and that the delay that is happening is usually costs, it's not usually, it's 100% costs someone their lives. So the message that I received from our soldiers, and they wanted me to send it over, is that as long as it takes is now.
Well, Kira, thank you so much for joining us today on Times Radio. And for what it's worth, there is a huge amount of solidarity from our audience to you and the people of Ukraine. Every time we discuss it on air, we get messages from people saying, thank you for talking about it, because we don't want this to slip down the agenda. So there's a lot of support for you. And thank you so much for coming on Times Radio today.
Thank you so much, James. It's so good to hear. Thank you, and thank you for your support.